Hello, my name is Kate and welcome to the local history of Northern Kentucky. Today we're going to take a look at a few local artists and some of their works through historic photographs from the library's Faces and Places database. And the first one that we'll start with is Frank Duveneck, and the two photos on the left, as well as the image on the right, are images of his paintings that we have on display here at the Covington branch. And the painting of the Virgin Mary shows the artwork as it was displayed in the library in 1994. And this piece was donated in 1987 by his grandchildren. And another image of interest is the home pictured at the right where Duveneck lived in Covington on Greenup Street. And he was born Frank Decker in 1848, and his father, who was a German immigrant, died when Frank was an infant, and his mother remarried to Joseph Duveneck, and Frank's name was changed to that of his stepfather's. And when he began his work as an artist, Johann Schmidt was Duveneck's mentor. And Schmidt was born in Germany, and he received training in the arts in Munich, and he moved to the United States for more opportunities in this work. And he also moved throughout the East Coast and the Midwest, painting murals for various churches, as well as a couple of churches locally, such as Mother of God in Covington, and also Holy Cross Immaculata in Mount Adams in Cincinnati. And Frank Duveneck married Elizabeth Boot, and they had a son, Frank Jr. And the couple is pictured there at the bottom. And he's also shown here in a doctorate robe that was received from the University of Cincinnati in 1917, when they gave him an honorary degree. And he also taught at the Cincinnati Art Academy, and a couple of these photos depict his classes. And the one at the top shows another local artist named Dixie Selden, who is pictured there at the bottom in the middle. And one interesting Kentucky Post article, which was from 1896 and was entitled "How the Heroes of the Brush Observed Christmas," that described some of the holiday celebrations of the Cincinnati Art Club, which Duveneck was involved with. And at this event, the art club had a Christmas tree and also a holiday exhibit of sketches and drawings. And Frank Duveneck was presented with a gold-tipped cigarette holder, a silver match safe, and also a cane by the members. And after lunch was served, a Christmas punch bowl modeled by artist Clem Barnhorn was unveiled. And several other early newspaper articles describe Duveneck's travels to Munich, Germany. And one note about a Munich trip was published in April of 1905. And this noted that he would leave for the trip as soon as he completed the Emerson statue that he was working on for Harvard University. And this referred to the life-size statue that he was sculpting of Ralph Waldo Emerson that depicted Emerson seated upon a chair. And he created the plaster model, and then when that was completed, it was sent to New York and was cast in bronze, and the statue still resides in Harvard's Emerson Hall. And Frank Duveneck died at the age of 70 on January 3rd, 1919 at Good Samaritan Hospital in Cincinnati. And after his death, the Cincinnati Art Club they released a statement, and they said in part that Duveneck was the best type of what they termed a father to all interested in art. He knew hard work in his early day, and it did not narrow him. He knew sorrow, but it did not embitter him. His judgment was always of the best, and he was gifted with a wonderful vision. And Harlan Hubbard is the next local artist we'll look at, and he was a native of Bellevue. And he was born in 1900, and like Duveneck, his father also died when he was pretty young. And after this, Harlan and his mother moved to New York City to join two of his older brothers there who were already living and working in New York. And so he attended high school there in the Bronx, and then he went to the National Academy of Design in New York. But by 1919, he and his mother returned to the area, but this time, when they came back, they settled in Fort Thomas. And Hubbard said that from a young age, he was very interested in painting, and he always enjoyed the landscapes of northern Kentucky and of the Ohio River. And he married Anna Eichenhout, and in 1944, they built a shanty boat and they traveled along the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, and they completed this journey in Louisiana 8 years later. So he and his wife, Anna, lived a very quiet and simple life, and they built a house on the shore of the Ohio River in Trimble County, Kentucky. And these images depict their life in their home and of Hubbard's art. And two of these pieces of Covington and of the riverfront hang in the library. And the oil painting on the left that portrays Covington in the 1850s was commissioned in 1934. And Dixie Selden was a student of Frank Duveneck at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. And the painting there at the bottom right, showing the woman hanging laundry, is on display here at the library in our local history and genealogy department. And Dixie Selden, she would often travel to pursue education in art. And one of her trips took her to England in 1914, and she studied with a well-known artist there. And then a few years prior to that, she and Emma Mendenhall, who was her friend and also a fellow artist, they left for a trip in 1909 to visit Italy, and they spent a year abroad there studying art. And some of her other travels included time in Normandy and Brittany in France, a trip to Granada in Spain, as well as some time in Germany, the Scandinavian countries, and then also she also visited China and Japan. And then the photo in the middle shows Mrs. Cook and another local artist, Lela Cooney, on the right, who were admiring a portrait painted by Dixie Selden. And she died at the age of 67 in 1935. And she was described as being of small stature, but having a lively, spontaneous nature with joyous optimism. Then on January 1st, 1959, Lela Cooney, who was a well-known artist in Covington and northern Kentucky at the time, she began renting second floor studio space to have as her art studio from O.G. Loomis, who was an engineer, and his consulting business was situated in the home at 542 Greenup in Covington. And this was noted in a Kentucky Post article. And she said that since she had acquired her very own studio, she had painted more than previously, and she had not had to curtail her many other activities. And before she started renting out the studio space, she painted out of her apartment, which was across the street from the the studio. She lived at the Arthur Apartments on Greenup at the time. And Lela Cooney was a member of the Covington Art Club, and over the years, her work appeared in local galleries and exhibits, and she was also an art instructor, and she taught classes in Dayton, Ohio, as well as locally at Baker Hunt. And these are a few photographs that we have of Lela Cooney and her artwork from Faces and Places. And these photos were taken in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And her artwork focused primarily on abstract oil paintings, and she also did sketches as well. And Aileen McCarthy is pictured here with some of her artwork, and she was a former student of Frank Duveneck, and she was often described as one of Covington's outstanding artists. And her education began at La Salette Academy in Covington, and her watercolor tutor was Henrietta Wilson, and Frank Duveneck was the one that taught her to paint. And she studied with him for 2 years. One of the first times where her art was publicly noted was in 1915, when she had recently completed a portrait of the Bishop C.P. Mays. And this work was displayed at an art store on Madison Avenue in Covington. And in response to the work, critics noted that the picture was the most striking likeness ever made of the bishop, and was especially remarkable for the depth of expression for the eyes, a characteristic so notable in his features. And Aileen McCarthy, when talking about her work, she stated that she could not remember a time that she wasn't interested in art. And her exhibits were often noted throughout the years in newspaper announcements. And one of those announcements was made in November of 1950, which was an art exhibit and a tea that was sponsored by the Arts and Crafts section of the Covington Women's Club. And they were celebrating National Art Week. And she would also give lectures on portrait painting to groups such as the Dayton Women's Club and the Covington Art Club. And along with lectures on painting, Aileen McCarthy would often speak on the life of Frank Duveneck as well, and what it was like to work with him. And the next artist, John Ruthven, is not a native of Northern Kentucky, but was born in Cincinnati. And these two photos of him both come from the Kentucky Post collection in Faces and Places. And the first one is an undated photo, and the second one was from spring of 1990. And this is from an event where he participated in a charity auction for the NKY Scholarship Fund. And he's pictured here with co-chairman of the event, Marcia Jose, and Joyce Griffin. And here at the auction for NKY, people had the opportunity to bid to spend a day with Ruthven at his studio, and he also donated the Dancing Swans painting to the auction. And his work and paintings focused on wildlife, and he also attended the Cincinnati Art Academy and graduated in 1947. And while he was there, he was classmates with another well-known wildlife artist, Charlie Harper. And as he began his career, he rented studio space in Cincinnati. And one of his first clients was for a new company at the time, which was Play-Doh. And the company, they needed somebody to design a cartoon character for their brand. So he designed the character Play-Doh Pete, and he did a lot of the Play-Doh company's artwork for about 15 years. And so he found Ruthven found his niche in wildlife art, and his career grew from there. And one of his first well-known projects was the federal stamp that he painted in 1960. And that was of an image of redhead ducks. And that served as a campaign to preserve wetlands. And he also developed a relationship with the park system in Hamilton County and created artwork for advertisements for the parks and for levy campaigns. And over his career, Ruthven also painted American eagles for 3 presidents: Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. And another interesting fact about his work was that he painted the cardinal, which is the most popular personalized Ohio license plate. And this cardinal has raised more than $5 million for the Ohio Division of Wildlife over the years. And so next we move to James Werline, who is from Maysville, Kentucky, and he is a watercolor artist. And the photo here on the left is from 1991. And at that time, he was based in Amelia, Ohio, and he had his home studio and his art gallery there. And he was selected to produce a calendar for the Kentucky Bicentennial. And this calendar was to commemorate 12 of the state's historic buildings. And part of this project was to distribute the calendars to every school in Kentucky, and then 5,000 additional calendars would be produced and would go on sale to the public. And so he did a lot of planning and research to select each of the 12 historic sites for the calendar. And he visited each one and would take photographs of all the architectural details so that he could prepare to paint them. And when he discussed marketing his paintings at a national level, he also reflected on his experience working with John Ruthven and how much he learned from him as they collaborated. And James Werline, he earned his bachelor's degrees in art and art education from Morehead State, and he also taught at Southern State Community College in Hillsboro, Ohio. And there on the left, he was painting a watercolor of the Dinsmore House in Boone County. And this is one of the works that was added to that bicentennial calendar. And the picture in the center shows the completed version of this painting. And then the black and white photo on the right is a couple of years prior to this project. And that one was taken in 1988. And there in front was a card that that had been painted for Governor Wallace Wilkinson. And Introspect 1981 was the title of this photography exhibit that was done by Natalie Fobes, and that was presented at the Carnegie Arts Center in Covington. And she was a photographer at the time for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And the photographs from this exhibit were taken while she was on assignment with the Enquirer. And the exhibit demonstrated the double life of a photograph, and it was described that it didn't matter whether the assignment was fashion, spot news, or feature illustration. The pictures survive the stories and take on a life of their own. And also in 1981, she was recognized by American Photographers February edition as the outstanding new face in newspaper photojournalism. And she's had a very interesting and also very distinguished career. She is now based in Seattle, and her clients over the years have included National Geographic, Microsoft, Time, U.S. News and World Report, and many others. And her photographs that she took of the Exxon oil spill were also entered as evidence before the Supreme Court. And she has received over 200 awards throughout her career and was also a Pulitzer Prize finalist. And moving over to a different medium of art, there are a few photographs that we have in the database that display the art of stained glass. And the photos here show Walter Bambach, the owner of the Riordan Stained Glass Studio in Covington, at work. And he purchased the studio in 1975 from the Riordan family after being an employee there for 20 years. And he was born in Yugoslavia, and he and his family were part of a German ethnic community, and they'd settled in that area many years prior. And his family fled Yugoslavia, and they fled there to Austria. And when he was in Austria, he was 15 at that time, and Walter Bambach decided to enter a monastery to study for the priesthood. And while he was there, that was where he learned the craft of stained glass, and he became a monk. And part of his training involved repairing and restoring the cathedral windows that had been destroyed and damaged by bombings during World War II. And so 6 years after this, he chose not to renew his vows as a monk, but instead decided to come to the United States, as his parents had already come over. And so when he came over, he was able to purchase the stained glass studio in Covington. And at that time, at the time that he purchased the studio in Covington, his family, they lived in Price Hill, and he and his family lived upstairs from his parents' apartment. And the family stated that they decided to come to this particular area because his mother had distant relatives in Cincinnati, but they also explained that they had been hearing about the city of Cincinnati for many years. And Walter Bambach owned the stained glass studio in Covington from 1975 to 2002. And this is Bruce Lanier, a glass blower in Northern Kentucky. And these pictures come from the Kentucky Post collection in Faces and Places. And the one on the left is dated 1974, and the one on the right is from 1978. And so when Cincinnati's bicentennial came around, there was a large debate that caused a city hall hearing to determine if including winged pigs in the sculpture commemorating the city's 200th anniversary would be appropriate. And the design of the sculpture with the winged pig, it was meant to hint at the city's former status as Porkopolis, but people had a lot of strong opinions on both sides of the issue as to whether the pigs should be included in the sculpture. So this created what the newspapers referred to as pigmania, and local artists got involved, and glassblower Bruce Lanier began producing glass winged pigs for sale. And another local artist, John Ruthven, joined in. And so he sold wooden hand-painted pigs on a stick with pink felt wings as a part of Pigmania in Cincinnati. And Lanier got into glassblowing when he observed the art while he was on a trip to Gatlinburg. And he soon after that, he learned the craft and he opened his business on Pike Street in Covington. And moving to pottery and ceramics, a couple of these photos show a pottery class kiln at NKU in 1973, there on the left. And then art teacher Terry Johnson is pictured helping student Chris Mullins throw a pot at Boone County High School. And then there on the right, pottery is being stacked to be put into a kiln. And we also have several photos showing the art of quilting in Faces and Places. And this one on the left shows Angela Brownworth at a quilting class here at the library in 1974. And the one on the bottom shows Anna Randall making a quilt in her home in 1981. And I hope that you've enjoyed this look at local artists and historical photographs from our Faces and Places database. For more historical photographs of Northern Kentucky, please visit facesandplaces.kentonlibrary.org. And if you have any questions, please give us a call in the local history and genealogy department at 859-962-4070, or send us an email at history@kentonlibrary.org. Thanks for watching.